Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the My Career Path podcast, show where I talk with people about how they found success in their careers. Today, I have a very special guest. I have my own dad, Doug Bullock. Doug is the head of HR at Utah State University. His official title, as he told me, is the Associate Vice President of Human Resources. So it was just awesome to talk with him about his career path, what he's done, and what he recommends. So hope you enjoy. We're just going to jump straight into it. Doug, how would you introduce yourself to a group of people? What would you say are like your biggest achievements in your career?
Well, I always try to start with family first. I think I strive first and foremost with faith, family, and friends. But I have 5 kids. 4 of those are married. We've got one that's just graduated high school. Got 3 grandkids and one on the way, and really enjoy spending time with family. So I think first and foremost, any achievement I have and any success my children have in spite of me as a parent, I think that's a good thing. So that's nice to see from a family standpoint. From an educational standpoint, as far as achievements for me, I think being able to get 2 different degrees, one a bachelor's of business administration from Idaho State University that I completed with an emphasis in human resources, and then going on to complete a master's of business administration, MBA. I finished that at Boise State University, and probably my wife should get more credit because she supported the 5 kids at home and took care of them while I went to night school. And it took a long time to kind of chunk that away and get that finished. And we were both pretty proud of that accomplishment when we finished it. And then professionally, I've got some HR certifications, both my senior professional in human resources from a nationally recognized HR group, and I also I'm a certified compensation professional through World at Work, which is another professional HR organization, and I'm also certified in change management. My MBA, also my electives were in something called instructional performance technology, which nobody really understands, which another term that a lot of people do understand is organizational development, which really is around identifying people gaps and process gaps and helping to improve people and processes through HR techniques. So, I mean, those are kind of, as I look at family, as I look at education, as I look at my HR sort of credentials, those things sort of stand out for me.
So you're very successful in my eyes.
Depends on the day, but I'll take it.
So what is your current position right now? What you're currently working as? What's your title?
Currently, I am the head of human resources, which my official title is an associate vice president of human resources. I work at Utah State University, so I am the lead HR person for the university. We run about 4,000 benefited employees, and when we add in the other student employees and wage hourly folks, we run about 12,000 employees total.
Wow. So with 4,000 kind of benefited and 12,000 total, how many do you work with like directly? So like I would think there's like a team that you kind of oversee and manage that help manage the rest. Is that kind of how it works?
No, I have memorized 12,000 names, and I know all of these people independently and personally.
I would expect nothing less.
No, absolutely not. I have a great team that works for me. I've got about 30 to 40 staff, if you include the wellness team that I have as well. And they help sort of oversee the day-to-day functions of the functional areas in HR, which are typically things like compensation, benefits, training and development, our HIRS system, which is our technical system that we use, our analytics and reporting, our employee relations, the wellness team, which I mentioned, our recruiting team that helps post and supports the recruitment of positions. And what else am I missing? I think those are the main chunks of HR. I also deal with policy development, provide support to the deans and vice presidents, and really just try to be involved more at a strategic level in driving the vision for HR and the university forward as we try to affect change in culture in a positive way.
That's a great introduction to kind of who you are and what you do. So for this podcast, my kind of target audience is high school students and kind of college, mid-level college or graduating college students as well, just to kind of help people find out what they want to do and get kind of a taste of different opportunities that are available to them. So let's go with kind of what your career path kind of looked like. What was the very first job that you held And what did that look like?
My first job in HR.
The first job ever.
First job ever.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, first job ever. I grew up in a small town in southeast Idaho, and my dad owned a small farm. And so, really, farming and learning to work hard and have that work ethic was really my first introduction to real work, I guess, and putting some calluses on my hands. Beyond that, through teenage years and kind of into through the college years, held a variety of sort of part-time jobs or full-time jobs, depending. I worked as a full-service gas station attendant, which you don't see a lot anymore, but basically people would drive up to the pumps and came out and um, had pumped gas and squeegeed windows and checked oil, and worked some of the mechanic duties and tire shop at a small service station. Also worked as a state park ranger for the state of Idaho for a summer. Did construction work early on, and kind of got me to my college years where I worked as a psychiatric technician at State Hospital South in Blackfoot, Idaho, and did that for 5 years while I finished up my bachelor's degree, and then was fortunate enough to kind of move out beyond that into what's now called juvenile corrections, and was the first HR person for them in St. Anthony, Idaho. And then from there went on to, I'm probably getting ahead of where you wanted to go, but as far as kind of finishing the track out, went from public sector HR work to private sector HR work for Blue Cross of Idaho for 18 years, and then moved back to public sector and higher ed into my current position now, working for Utah State University.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like you kind of started with your, the farm job, and then it just kind of bounced around until you kind of landed in human resources. How do you think you kind of ended up there? What drew you to HR and human resources?
Well, I wish.
Or was it just kind of luck of the draw? That's just kind of where it ended up, and you ran with it.
Well, I really wish I had a better story. Well, I have a good story, but it's not that it was methodical or that it was my first choice, but it has turned out to be a great career. I actually wanted to be an accounting major, and I had an accounting professor or accounting teacher in high school that I really liked a lot, and he helped me to really like accounting and bookkeeping and debits and credits. And so I went to Idaho State University and declared my major in accounting, planned on becoming a CPA and doing that. However, I kind of learned that my accounting grades struggled a bit, and I wasn't doing as well in that as I'd like. And I got to be midway through my junior year and towards my bachelor's, and got into a tax accounting class. And the book was about 4 inches thick. And when I opened the book on my desk, I still remember to this day the panic attack that I had. I opened the book. I could see the tiny, tiny font that this book was published in. It was like actuarial font. And I could see all the tax code sections and subsection references. And I literally remember closing the book and saying, I can't do this. I've made a terrible mistake, and I don't want to do this for a living, and I can't push a pencil. And I couldn't stand it when I couldn't balance to the penny, and it was bad. And so I went from there to going, what the heck am I going to do? I'm halfway through my junior year. I've invested all this time and money. I went to the Idaho State University Career Center, where they offered a battery of tests, aptitude tests and career sort of related tests. Completed those. And back in the day, I'm old, and you're probably too young to remember, but the old printers they were dot matrix printers. So it made a lot of noise, and they basically tapped out the results. They came out on long printer paper that had tabs on both sides that had holes in them that fed the paper, and you tore those off, tore the fringe off. And I remember getting my results from the test, and it gave me my top 3 occupations to go into. And for whatever reason back then, it was gender normed. And so it basically said, if you're a man, here's the jobs. And if you're a woman, here's the jobs. And my top 3, I remember, were number 1, a male bus driver, number 2, a female Air Force pilot, and number 3, management, working in management, a male manager. And I just remember thinking about those 3 jobs and going, well, first of all, a bus driver, that's literally a job that's going nowhere. And second, I really did want to fly airplanes. That actually sounded really exciting to me, but I was not willing to make the change in gender to do that if it needed to be female. And number 3, management. I had actually taken a couple of personnel classes, a couple of management classes, and liked those. And so I left that testing center and went back out and took a few more classes that way, and was able to get my bachelor's finished up with taking some other HR classes. And from there, again, I was fortunate to land my first HR job right out of college, which was pretty atypical at the time. Most of the time, you weren't able to get right into HR out of college. But that's sort of the circuitous path that led me from an accounting major to testing to being where I'm at today.
That's great. I remember when I was at BYU for a semester, I remember taking that first accounting class, and it was a huge auditorium. There were probably 200 students in it. And it was, I remember the first day of class, the professor gets up there and goes, I'm glad you're all here. This is a very popular degree, a very popular, it's a common thing when you're going into college. You're like, accounting, that sounds good. I've heard that they make good money. I heard that, working with numbers, math, things like that. And the professor gets up and goes, 80% of you will fail and have to retake this class. And I was like, all right, no, thank you. If that's what accounting is, and it's very competitive at BYU. I
Yes.
realize that, but
Yes.
I was just like, all right, if that's kind of the common thing, and that's the first thing you do in the first day of class, I was like, that's not for me.
Yep.
What kind of drew you to management? You said you liked management. What were the things that you really liked about that?
I think in my coursework at Idaho State, I really liked the organizational behavior classes. So the case studies that basically gave you a scenario with people problems and having to come up with ideas for how to solve those. And it wasn't like accounting. There wasn't one right answer and it had to be to the penny. It really gave you a chance to kind of explore human behavior and motivation and what's really going on. And so I like those classes a lot, and those have really kind of borne out to play well as I've gone through my career.
Another question I have for you is as far as mentors go, as I've been looking at different career paths and kind of listening to other people and what they've kind of talked about and how they kind of ended up where they are, who would you say are some of your biggest either cheerleaders or biggest help in reaching point where you are today?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. And again, going back to faith, family, and friends, I mean, being a religious guy, making sure that God was part of the process and helping me as I've made choices. And I've had a lot of meetings where I've had to say a prayer before I've gone in because they've been tough meetings. And so I think keeping that piece in perspective, my spouse, of course, supporting me through the educational component and getting through school, and again, taking care of the kids while I was doing that. And then I think a couple mentors that come to mind is my very first supervisor in HR. He gave me a shot, which I really to this day still appreciate, because even as I interviewed for that first HR job, knowing I had no experience other than my coursework, for me to be a young 20 something and for him to make the offer to me, which I was quite surprised about. And he basically said, we really think you've got potential to grow into this job. And at that time, that was the first HR person they had hired for that state agency. Beyond what my boss had been doing up to that point, he had other responsibilities, and he was willing to give it a go and to train me up. And so I think that really left a mark on me, and I think affected my leadership style to always want to give back and give people an opportunity to develop and grow. So his name was Brian Chapman, and I have great respect for him and what he did in giving a young snot-nosed kid from Southeast Idaho a shot to be an HR person and try to grow the HR program there when nobody knew really what HR was at that point in that agency. So I think he stands out as one. I've had other leaders that I've worked for who've been mentors, both good and bad. I've had some who were very knowledgeable and very good, but I learned some ways that I did not want to lead based on the way they led me. Some were probably a little more worried about themselves and how things would reflect on them, to the point where that kind of impeded our ability to take the departments where I wanted to go. But others were good as far as even my current boss now. He's super supportive. Really isn't about blame or failure. He's really about just how do we get better and how do we learn from this. And so I think those styles have really influenced me and helped me. Another person that I have a lot of respect for, he actually worked for me, but one of my organizational development and training specialists, Tim Cormier, he always had a positive attitude, always walked the talk, always looking for applying principles like what does good look like and how can we get there, and good coaching. And so I really have tried to model my style more after him as well, and have appreciated following his career and the good that he's doing, the different companies that he's worked for. So, it's not just one mentor, it's a lot of people. And I think people people need more mentors today, particularly in this workforce and this advancing technology, where you need somebody who can ground you, who can keep you humble, who you can counsel with, who you can kick ideas around with, and who will show you your blind spots and help you get better. And so I've been very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's incredibly important, especially nowadays. I mean, going through the pandemic and kind of going, hey, we need to isolate, we need to keep to ourselves, keep to our families, and kind of things like that. I feel like that's been really detrimental to allowing people to find these mentors or find these people that they can really work with and grow with. And that's kind of one of the main reasons why I also wanted to start this podcast and to start this show, is to help encourage people to meet with other people, to reach out, to kind of branch out and find those people who can help open those doors, open those opportunities, because it's so difficult right now to just do it on your own. You need to have other people. There was a quote, I don't remember who said it or where it came from, but it's business is easy until people get involved. And then once people get involved, you gotta work with them, and that's where some of the problems things come up. But that's also where some of the best outcomes happen, is when working with people. So I appreciate you sharing that. I want to get kind of more into now what HR is, what you do a little bit more. What's the most appealing part about it for kind of an up and coming person in the workforce? What advice can you give to someone who's potentially looking at HR for a potential career? What are the main things that draw you to HR that you really like about it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Often when I'm interviewing people, I ask them why they want to get into HR. And honestly, the answer I am not looking for is I like to work with people. Because I joke around sometimes that my job would be great if it weren't for the people some days. And then I go, oh, the HR guy probably shouldn't say that, because we really do work with people every day. But I do worry that people say, oh, I want to get into HR because I like working with people. Well, you're going to be dealing with some of the tougher situations. I don't get a lot of calls every day that say, hey, I just wanted to call and tell you HR is doing a great job and I
Yeah.
really love you guys and love what you're doing, love the training, love I just want to let you know everything's going great. I don't need anything. I mean, when the phone rings in my office, somebody's got a problem and they need something. And usually it's a people problem where they have got somebody who's having a problem or a performance issue or whatever the case might be. So I think I've learned in HR, you've got to be able to handle a lot of different things. So if you're somebody who likes to know how your day is going to go every day and you want it to go that way, HR is not for you. One of the things I love about HR is the variety. So I think being able to know that you're going to be working on a compensation issue 1 minute, you're going to be working on a benefit plan document the next, you're going to hear about an employee relations issue the next, you're going to get a call about somebody who's got a serious illness. Not that I like to hear about that, but you end up bouncing around to topic to topic to topic, and you have to be okay with that. I think the great thing about that is I never get bored because it's never the same thing day in, day out. The hard part is I show up at 8 o'clock, think I've got a plan for the day, I'm behind on email, whatever the case may be, and at 8:03 my day takes a turn. So being able to be adaptable, being open to being interrupted throughout the day, and you do have to preserve time for yourself and desk time and close your door and work on stuff you need to, but I've also got to be available for people. So if you like variety, if you like the adrenaline rush, I guess, of what's happening in the moment, I think there's a lot of great things with regards to HR that can help that way. Helping people with wellness, helping people with employment, recruiting issues, helping to look at the training programs that you're offering, looking at the culture, again, strategically where I'm at in my level now, being able to think about how can we make people want to stay? How do we increase belonging? How do we improve the culture? How do we train leaders to be better leaders so people will want to stay? Those are the culture things that really drive me now, that I think will really help us make USU even better than it is today. So I don't know, that's kind of a rambling answer, but that's some of what I like about HR, and what appeals to me is it's never a dull moment.
It's a lot of problem solving, thinking on your feet, and kind of working with your team to find the right solution. So
Yeah, definitely people problem and being problem solvers on processes. HR, you'll hear terms like, well, HR is just transactional. Often when companies are growing, they they get to a point where they realize they need somebody to handle payroll or they need somebody to handle the paperwork. And, that's great. That's part of an HR function, but that's transactional HR. Transformational HR is when you can move beyond that, get your processes nailed down, and now you can start saying, how do we evolve our people? How do we develop them? How do we develop our leaders? How do we develop and maintain the culture that we want to attract and retain talent? And so that's one of the things I talk to my team about is let's make sure, take care of the transactional stuff, but move towards transformational HR and moving things forward.
So if someone were interested in applying and joining your team right now, what do you think are the most important things? What do you look for in a candidate?
What do I look for in a candidate? Well, again, I kind of mentioned a little bit. What some of the things I'm not looking for, which is I'm not just looking for somebody who says I love people, so you should hire me. I think again, those people who can be humble, can be vulnerable, can recognize their own mistakes. If someone comes in with too much confidence in their skills that they know everything about HR, I've been doing this almost 30 years and I never say I have seen it all. And I never think I know it all because as soon as I do that, there is something that will come down the pike that will be very, very different. So I think, people who are willing to learn, willing to be part of a team, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey and seek first to understand. So as you come in and look at processes, I tell my new hires, hey, I want you to look at our stuff. And if it doesn't make sense, ask a lot of questions, understand why we do it that way. But if you think the way we're doing it is dumb, then speak up. I'm more than open to changing it, making it better, and improving it. But we won't know that unless you speak up and say something. So I think those are things that I would look for. Uh, People who again can relay to me that they realize they're not perfect, that they do have conflicts sometimes with people, and it's more important to me about how they handle that. The skill stuff, yeah, it's nice to have it, particularly if they have experience in different HR jobs. But again, as someone who got to start without a lot of HR experience, you can hire for fit and train for skill. I think if people are open to those entry level jobs, then that works well. As you get into more experienced jobs, of course, you got to be able to have some backing behind you to be able to handle those
And
things.
that's something that just in going back and forth over email where I sent you kind of the questions that I was considering asking. That's one thing that kind of stuck out to me was hire for fit, train for skill. Because I know as a recent college graduate and looking at kind of all of these potential job opportunities for my degree, it was, hey, I want 3 to 5 years of experience. I want 5 to 7 years of experience in these things. And I was like, I just don't have that. What would you say to someone who's kind of seeing those jobs and going, everybody wants 3 to 5 years of experience? I remember seeing a meme on Facebook where it's the circular logic where it's I can't get a job because I don't have experience and I can't get a job because I don't have experience, and it just keeps going round and round. What would you say to someone kind of looking at these jobs? Should they just go for it?
Yeah, I think particularly in today's market, it's a competitive market. It's been a hyper competitive market, honestly, the last year or so with COVID and with what people who are still opting out of the workforce. So employers are hurting, and I think employers are now having to reevaluate what they really do need for entry level, for minimum qualifications to get somebody in the door. So I would say always go for it. If you see something that's of interest to you, I do tell candidates, just because if there's 9 tick boxes on the things that they want, and you've got 8 of the 9, but you don't want to apply because you don't have that ninth. No, go ahead and apply because you don't know what their applicant pool is going to look like. Applicant pools have shrunk dramatically over the last 2 or 3 years, and so employers are trying to look at who can I get and what experience do they have. Now, some jobs, again, are you going to be the head of HR for a big university without some experience? No. But I think as you look at those entry level jobs, you may be able to get in, or you may be able to express interest in the role or the company in a way that maybe you're not right for this opening, but hey, we have another one coming up. So I would say get in the pool and do the best you can and find ways to get experience. That might be trying to volunteer, might be trying to job shadow someone, interviewing people who do the work like you're doing today. So I think those things can all sort of help with that process.
Okay, one of the last questions I kind of have in this section is what would you recommend for someone as far as looking at a degree or kind of further training or kind of certificates or things like that for someone interested in HR that they should kind of look into? Is it mostly get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree?
Well, I do. I mean, I do think education is important. I think there are some HR folks who have grown up with small companies who maybe don't have the degree, but who have gained experience over time. So I don't. I've got one employee that works for me that's got 20 plus years experience and doesn't have a degree, but this person's been doing HR for all those years and has deep knowledge in that. So I don't know that it's requisite necessarily, but I do think if you're in today's world, again, with a hyper competitive market and you're competing against other people who want to be in HR, a lot of them probably are going to have a bachelor's at a minimum and maybe a master's either in HR or some business related field. I don't know that you have to have strict HR. I mean, I've got people with bachelors in all kinds of things. The nice thing about HR is psychology degrees matter because you're dealing with people and motivation and how people think. And communication majors, we're always writing communications and trying to figure out how to be effective in our communications to other people. Understanding business and finance. One of the reasons I got my MBA was I wanted to be able to speak the lingo with senior executives. I wanted to, understand the financials and how to read them, and to know what things like EBITDA are, and being able to talk that language and have a seat at the table when we're doing that, and that they don't just think, oh, you're just the HR person, you don't understand the business. So I do think education has a place. And even kind of going back to the former question a little bit, I think even as a university, we have had to look at our minimum qualifications for openings. Because we're a university, we often feel like people need inflated education, to the point where we had some staff assistants that they were requiring master's degrees for. And I'm like, really? You really think
You're really limiting,
don't want to
you're
minimize
limiting your applicants there, I would think. But
yeah, you don't want to minimize what they do. They serve a critical role, but do they truly need a master's? If you've got a good staff assistant who's got 3 to 5 years of good experience supporting someone and taking care of the headaches that we need them to take care of so that you can be freed up to do your day job, then why in the world would you require them to have a master's in that case? And so I think we do need to be revisiting our educational levels and requirements. Also in HR, going back to credentials, and I probably wouldn't. There are some student organizations that will help you get your PHR, your Professional and Human Resources, or your SPHR, Senior Professional and Human Resources, although that one usually comes with experience. So I do think there are some credentialing that you could look at, but personally, I would say get those after you get a job. The PHR might help you on the front end. World at Work certifications are pretty expensive. I'd almost say you want to have an employer who's hopefully helping to offset some of those costs for those things. But the great thing is nowadays with YouTube and LinkedIn, there are trainings available. And if you have access to LinkedIn Learning, for example, there's lots of things you can learn and do to really build those skill sets and I think be valuable to an employer, particularly again in this market where we're looking for good people.
Thank you so much. I've really appreciated your time. Just to kind of close off, I like to ask people what kind of funny or humorous stories that they've had kind of over their many jobs that they've held. What are some things that stand out to you? I've kind of asked you to prepare a little bit, but what's probably the most hilarious or humorous story that you kind of look back on and you just kind of laugh to yourself about?
Well, most of them I can't talk about until
Okay.
the lawsuits are over. So
well, I appreciate that. Wow. We'll get back in touch once they're over.
No. I think a couple that come to mind that I think I can share that won't reveal where or which job or whatever that were happening. Again, one of the things we deal with sometimes is workers' compensation and performance management and attendance issues. We had a particular individual who was missing a lot of work, leaving early, saying that they had really severe back problems and back pain. And yet it was just the pattern of when they were gone and when they needed to be gone was odd. It just didn't seem to, it seemed to have a pattern, but we really couldn't identify it. And it was pretty consistent about the time of day that it was happening. And on one day I happened to need to leave early to go to one of my son's basketball games at middle school. And when I got there and got in the gym, I noticed that this employee was there in a referee uniform, and he was reffing the game. and he was running up and down the court and making calls and appeared to be in absolutely no pain whatsoever. And so I had a little digital camera back then that I took to take pictures of my son playing basketball. But I found myself videoing this referee running up and down the court so that I could sort of gather evidence to go back and talk with him and his supervisor about his alleged medical condition and his need for all of this time off from work. And what we realized was the days that he was taking off early were days that he was reffing games. It matched up with the high school
level basketball games.
Or the middle school. I think he was in middle school basketball schedule. So and so he was gone. And there weren't a lot of people in the stands that day. And about, I don't know if it was before the half or after, but he happened to see me in the stands. And you could just see the blood drain out of his face. He hadn't seen me recording him. But it was interesting because right after that, he went over to his bag, his gym bag that he had on one of the timeouts, and pulled out a bottle of pills and turned towards me and made sure that I could see that he was opening a bottle of pills and taking whatever it was to, I'm sure, take care of the excruciating pain.
You just couldn't see the back brace underneath his ref outfit. Yeah, you couldn't see it underneath his shirt.
So it was, but the really bad thing is when I got home that night, my son knew that I had been there and I'd been recording. And he thought I was recording him. And so when he was watching the videos, he's like, "Dad, what are you doing? There's no pictures of me. There's no video of me. You're videoing this guy in the black and white striped shirt up and down the court." Because I was so focused on capturing this employee who was basically being fraudulent about things. And so that was definitely a funny one. And one other one that sort of comes to mind is, again, I never say I've seen it all. We had an employee at one of my jobs that basically he was a little bit tech savvy, and he decided that because the company had a lot of internet power, that he would siphon that off. And he basically installed equipment to be able to broadcast internet bandwidth to his home. And we believe he was chunking that up and selling it to customers.
Way.
We found out about it because one of our facilities guys was up on the roof and he's like, "Hey, what is this cabling and this dish thingy that's up here? That I don't recognize this. What does it do?" And like, it's not ours. And so they went down and shut it off. They traced it back and pulled the plug. And 30 minutes later, when they went back, it was plugged back in. And what we think happened is that his internet customers started calling him and complaining that their internet was down.
And he went up.
So he plugged it back in. So we figured out who it was, and we pulled him in and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I checked the employee handbook, and it doesn't say I can't do this, so it's not a violation of policy." And I'm just like, so people's thought processes,
letter of the law versus spirit
bizarre.
Of the law. It's not written. It's fair game.
Yeah, if you don't explicitly say I can't, then I can. And so I'm always amazed at people's thought processes around things, and people rationalize other things. So those are two stories, I guess, that jump to mind that aren't too incriminating and hopefully not too traceable, but lots of different things over the years.
So there it is, guys. I hope you enjoyed this conversation I had with Doug. I know I loved it. I always love talking with my dad and getting tips and tricks from him. So if you do like this podcast, leave a 5-star review. Send me your feedback, your thoughts, people who you'd like to hear from. I'd love to get anybody else on the podcast who'd love to share their stories. So thanks so much. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day.